The spider that we're going to color here is kind of like an average spider. It's not a particular species of spider. So if you were drawing a very particular type of spider, you might find some variation, but you're basically going to find all these parts. And we're also going to be doing a female spider, as it says up here, so we're going to see a female part down here that you wouldn't have in a male. And before we get started, let's just look at the drawing overall and notice that we have 1, 2 body parts. And if you've already drawn an insect, you know they have 3. So what's missing? Well, we have an abdomen here, just like we have in the insect. And this is sort of like the thorax and the head all put into one. And so we call it the Cephalo Thorax, and that word's written right up here. Cephalo means head, and then we have thorax. And we have the legs coming off of the cephalothorax, kind of where the thorax would be in an insect. And so here you see these dotted lines. These are where the legs would be coming off in the front view. We've kind of sliced the spider in half down the middle, so we still have the legs on the back side hanging off, but we sliced off the front ones. And this is where they would be attached. So let's look at a leg. I've drawn you a complete leg up here. And let's compare it to a human leg, because we're going to see a lot of words that are similar. So here we have a human leg. And let's see, what looks a little bit the same? Well, we kind of have a knee area up here, like this, as if this were the kneecap right here. And we have this is kind of like this. And this would be a little bit like that. And then when we get down to here, this would be kind of like some of the foot bones. The claw down here might be like the toes. And so we're going to borrow the words we use for these bones and apply them to a spider leg. But of course a spider doesn't have bones, but we're going to use the bone words to label these parts. Okay, so the first one we have is the femur, and on a human this is the femur right here, your thigh bone. And on a spider leg we'd have it here. Now you can write it on this one, or you can also write it on one of these legs here as well. And I'm using a nice fine drawing pen. You can use a pencil if you want to. And I'm going to also use this to draw in my eyes, so I want a nice dark black. Now if you've done an insect drawing already, you know that an insect does not have anything right here. It goes from the femur to the tibia. But in the spider we have a piece that reminds us a little bit of how there's a kneecap here. We call the kneecap the patella. So we're going to borrow the word patella, and we're going to call this little joint thing here the patella. P-A-T-E-L-L-A. Like I said, you can label just one of these. You don't have to do both. And then this would be the tibia. And that would be like this bone right here. T-I-B-I-A. Now the next segment is the metatarsus. M-E-T-A-T-A-R-S-U-S. And in the human foot it would be these, and these would be the tarsals and the metatarsals. But oddly enough, in the spider we put the metatarsus first and then the tarsus. So this little one here would be tarsus. T-A-R-S-U-S. T-A-R-S-U-S. And then the claw at the bottom. claw or claws, depending on the spider. They might look a little bit different on the different species. And then here we have, just like in an insect, we have a trochanter, Trochanter, and then this joint is the coxa, Coxa, and those are very similar to the insect. And then the other piece of external anatomy I want to do right now is the eyes. And I already have written here 8 simple eyes, not compound. So in an insect you have all those little facets. If you look up close at an insect eye, it looks like a whole bunch of little tiny dots, little lenses. But in a spider we don't see that. Here's an up close of a spider eye, and you can see it does not look like it's made up of lots of little tiny individual lenses. It's just one big glassy black thing. And how many do they have? Well, this one's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This one also 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, some of them have a few more or a few less. 8 is kind of average, so we're going to go with that. That's easy to remember. 8 legs, 8 eyes. Number 8 is easy to remember. And there are different arrangements. So they can be spread out or clumped together. There's, so different species of spiders might have their eyes arranged differently. We're going to kind of go with something like this. Here, that, or maybe this. And so you can make yours different if you want to, but what I'm going to do is draw, let's get a zoom in here so you can see. I'm going to draw 2 here, and then 2 kind of looking like they're coming out. These will be kind of in perspective a little bit. And I'll have 1 here and 1 here. Now I'm going to show you something tricky you can do to make the eye look like it's real. Do you see how there's a little white dot here in all the eyes? That's what makes them look glassy and shiny. It's that white area. So I'm going to leave a white spot. I think I'll circle it first. Draw a little circle, same place on both of them, and then leave that white and just color all around. And that kind of makes it look like it's actually shiny. Now this piece here, this little flap we see here, it's kind of like we left a little bit of the exoskeleton coming here, and we snipped here. That's the snip line. We snipped here, and then the rest of it is just cut. So we kind of see the outside shell right here. And then one other thing we need to add, you see this little space here? This is where we're going to put the palp, or the pedipalp. And so you've got this little, it's like a little finger sort of, make a couple little sections going down here like this. Label it palp, P-A-L-P. I'll put some hairs on it. And that's what the spider will use to help bring things into its mouth. It really is like having little fingers next to your mouth. Now we're ready to do the interior. I'm going to show you a picture of actually what it might look like. Somebody cut a spider, and I don't know if this is stained at all, but you can see it's kind of a big bunch of mush, and you go, what in the world is all that stuff? So that's why we're going to use colors to represent things. So spiders aren't really orange and blue and pink and green, but in our diagram the colors will really help us to see the different parts. So let's start with the nervous system, because it connects to the eyes here. We just did the eyes, and you see these little tiny things leading up here? Well, they will go up under and connect to the eyes.
So I'm going to use kind of a purple color. I don't know why, but to me, nervous system things are always kind of purplish or purplish pink, but you can use a different color. You can use whatever color you want to, as long as you put that color into the color code down here. There's a box down here that says nervous system, and you want to use that color to fill in the box, and then you know wherever that color is, that's the nervous system. So the nervous system goes behind this thing. You see it kind of, it's going to be on the bottom layer here. That behind here. And then it goes behind these things also. Now it kind of has some places where it just stops like that, goes off. And this is for you to fill in some extra branches going off, because the nerves will come off this main area. This is kind of like the brain. And the nerves will connect to, well, just about everything. Some nerves will go to the palp, and this will be the Venom Gland. Some nerves go to there. Nerves are going to go out, attached to the legs down here. Nerves. And then some of them will probably run out here too, but don't worry about that. At least if we just get the nerves running out to the legs. And then back here, we'll make some of the nerves running out and up, even maybe behind here a little bit, up into here. The nerves would just reach out everywhere. But if we drew all the nerves, it would kind of make it drawing a little too busy. So just something like that's okay. And then we could go ahead and label this main area here number 1. And that's why I'm using a nice pen. It's going to go on top of the pencil real well. But if you have a black pencil, that'll work too. And label that 1. And that down here says brain. Now it's a simple brain, nothing like yours. But it's just complex enough to be able to control the spider's behavior to a substantial degree. It has to decide when and where to spin a web. You know, it has to be able to see and feel. In fact, we could go ahead and put some hairs on here. The hairs on a spider's leg actually are a little bit different from an insect's. If you did the insect drawing already, you know, we put some hairs on that, but in here, now you don't have to draw this, I'm just going to show you. The hairs on a spider's leg, they kind of like go down like into a little pocket sort of. There's a special attachment area that's even more sensitive than on an insect. So the spider really, really relies on its sense of feel, because its eyes really aren't that good. These, they see light and dark very well, and maybe vaguely some kind of image of a shape. So when the spider looks at you, it's not really seeing you, it's seeing this big blur basically, but it can feel really, really well. And its hairs can tell it a lot of information. When something hits the web, it can feel what size the object is. It can tell very, very accurately whether it's a tiny gnat or whether it's a big bee that just got trapped. It can also tell the difference between a spider walking on it and an insect. It will know if it's a spider of the same species, although it still might eat it. It can tell if it's dangerous. If you touch a spider web with your finger, probably the spider's going to freak out and run away. It's not going to come out to eat your finger, because it can tell, wow, that was a dangerous tap, that was too much, and it's going to go run and hide. So its hairs, sense of feel,
is the primary sense. So the nervous system would actually be attached to all these little hairs, but that's ridiculous to try to draw that. So we're just going to say, all right, we know it's got hairs, but we also know they're attached to the nervous system. Let's see, next let's do the digestive system. I'm going to use orange. I don't know why, but digestive system just seems orange to me. Doesn't matter what color you use, as long as we go down here into this box and we color whatever color you're using, make the digestive system that color. And if we start, actually I started here, but it'd be better if you find the mouth. Now, not this fang thing, but you go back here, not the leg. There's a little place right here where the pencil is. That's the mouth area. So that's the beginning of the digestive system. This would be like what the equivalent of the throat, the pharynx, like this. So this would be sort of a little stomach right here. And then down into here would be the esophagus, which actually goes to another stomach. And we could see in an ant we have several stomachs. And here in the spider we also have several stomachs, the way that an ant does. The spider does not have a crop. And then we go all the way back here to see this little thing, little pouch, cloaca pouch, and then out. Now along the way we have these little funny things. They're also part of the digestive system, so we'll color them. These are little they're storage pouches. They can get much, much larger. And they also have digestive enzymes. They're also producing the little enzymes that break down and digest the food. So they do both jobs. And if we go back up here, you notice we missed some things up here. We've got these pouches. If you follow along, just like you're coloring this maze here, just keep following along. It goes up like this. And there's one behind. And then there are these things down here. And these go to the leg areas. You can see 1, 2, 3, 4. They're going right down to where the legs are. And this is actually to deliver food to the legs. The stomach has little side pouches that go over to the legs. So all the good sugars that you need for energy to move muscles, they can go down right there to the legs. Kind of a strange system. So let's label some of these parts. I'm going to use my black, and we'll talk about them again as we label them. So number 2 is the pharynx. You can write it right on there or next to it on the side. Either way, that's a number 2. Pharynx is the fancy word for throat. So we go back here and we have number 3, the sucking stomach. Try to zoom in there. It's this right here. And as the name suggests, the sucking stomach can suck. You would actually have muscles around here that can make this open and close. It can squeeze it shut, open, shut, open, shut. And when it does that, when it expands, it creates a vacuum and it sucks this way. And then when the muscles contract and press, the fluids in here are going to travel out. Now, why does it have a sucking stomach? Well, you may know that after it paralyzes its food source, let's say it's going to eat a fly that comes along, it's going to use the venom to paralyze the fly, and then it's going to squeeze out juices from here. Actually, back from here too, there's some digestive enzymes back here. They're going to come up into here, and and maybe from this pouch, it's going to squeeze out these digestive juices out here. It's kind of like spitting, and the digestive juices are actually going to come out and cover the thing that it's trying to eat, or maybe even go into it. If it's punctured a hole, it maybe will just spit these enzymes right into the insides of that fly or whatever it's eating. And then the enzymes will go to work and break down the food. It'll break down the insides of the fly, and the fly insides will kind of turn to soup. And then the sucking stomach reverses, and this becomes a sucking tube instead of a spitting tube, and it sucks those liquid insides back in. And then it can kind of swallow them, and then maybe a second round it'll spit some more enzymes out, digest, 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 and then it'll turn the stomach the other way, and it'll suck more liquid insect parts in. So there's still more digesting to be done though. Once the liquid insect comes in here, there's still more digesting that goes on. And let's label for the intestine. So this might be considered the intestine down here. This thing, it doesn't have intestines like ours. It doesn't look the same. It's just kind of a pipe. And then that goes down to the digesting stomach, number 5. And then these things are all digestive pouches called ceca. And you might label, maybe I'll just label this down here, number 6. You can label them all number 6 if you want, or you can just label 1, and we understand they're all like that. And again, they contain tiny digestive glands, but also serve as storage pouches. Now it's interesting to note right this point here, I'll point you out to this note up here. It says the exoskeleton around the abdomen, that'd be this layer right here, is much softer than the exoskeleton here around the cephalo thorax. So this is tough, and this is much softer, and the reason is that this can stretch a little bit. When the spider gets a really big meal, all these things in this area can get really large. They would fill up this area, and they would stretch, and the abdomen could get much, much larger. And that way it can store the food for a while, because maybe it might not get a meal every day. So this is the way it can store it. And then this pouch right back here is called the Cloaca Pouch, number 7, and it stores wastes. And this would kind of be a little bit maybe like your large intestine, your colon, the last part of your large intestine, and that would be where all the wastes get stored up. And then the exit would be right here, and it's called the anus, just like in other animals. You also see the word cloaca showing up with birds, and anytime you see cloaca or cloacal, that kind of means basically that the urine and feces are all combined. They're not separated. You know, in mammals we have a separate exit for the solid waste, and we have a separate exit for our liquid waste. But in the spider here, we just have one exit, and this just kind of stores everything. Now let's do the heart next. This giant thing up here is going to be our heart area. I'm going to use red just because to me heart seems red, so I'm going to color in my key down here. You don't have to use red. You can use something else, just as long as you note it in the key there. And we've seen something like this in the ant. If you've happened to do the ant drawing, insects have something similar. Except here we see it much larger. It's basically a tube. It's not a chambered heart like we see in mammals or even reptiles. It's very, very simple. It's just a tube of muscle. But it pumps the fluid around
Of course, the blood is not red. I'm coloring it red just because this is a diagram and we have to make it some color. But they do not have red blood. Actually, if you squished a spider, the juice would probably look kind of greenish blue because the fluid in here that sloshes around is very watery. It's not blood. It's called hemolymph. But it does contain a molecule that carries oxygen. In our bodies, we have hemoglobin, which is red. So the molecules inside our red blood cells contain iron, which gives it a red color. And so our blood is red. In the spider, we have a little molecule that is based not on iron, but on copper. And so it gives it a kind of greenish blue color when it hooks up with oxygen, when it oxidizes. Now copper, like if you see a penny, copper is that nice kind of brownish, goldish color. But when it combines with oxygen, it turns kind of a greenish blue. If you've ever seen copper things tarnish, you'll know that's true. Okay, so we have a little vessel coming off of the heart tube that goes up here, flowing here, and then you can kind of continue this on like this. Extend the vessels a little bit. Now down here, don't color this red. This is going to be the area that intakes oxygen. And I'm going to just choose a blue. It's right here, book lungs, the first box in the second column there where it says book lungs. And they're called book lungs because it looks like they have pages, like a book. So we're just going to make some lines like this. And this is a little bit like the gills in a fish. The purpose of the gills is to provide a lot of surface area that can come into contact with oxygen. And so here we have the same thing. We have all these little flaps. So they're long, they're not sticks, they're like whole flat pages. Imagine pages in a book. And those to the side of each page can contact the air. So there's the side of this page, and the side of this page, and this page. So if you imagine all those pages laid out on a table, that's how much surface area the book lung would provide. So if it didn't have these pages, you'd just have this much area right here. But every one of these pages adds a lot of surface area, and that way a lot of oxygen can be taken in. Now, most spiders, or at least some spiders, have another way to take in oxygen. Right back here, you see this little thing right in here? They have a tracheal tube. So turn this into a tube, bring it in, and if you've done the ant drawing already, you'll know they have little holes called spiracles. So just kind of bring this tube in and branch it off a little bit. You can see that. Point to it, and I'm going to say tracheal tube. So oxygen can go into there as well, very much like it does in an insect. And some spiders might rely on that a little bit more, like, I don't know, maybe a water spider that maybe comes to the surface. He could put his abdomen up and collect air in, something like that. So some spiders have these, some don't, but I thought we should go ahead and put it in because a lot of them do. And then we could label this other slit right here. This is you can actually see this slit on the bottom side of a spider. This is like, we call it the lung slit. Goes into the book lungs. So you can actually see, I'm not sure you can see, this is pretty tiny, but you should be able to see these on the bottom side of a spider. So let's just finish these up right now. And I'm going to use a dark blue for my Malpighian tubules. And they're called Malpighian because the guy that discovered these was an Italian gentleman. His last name was Malpighi, so we call them Malpighian. And they are right here. This is very much like the ant drawing, where we have these tubes going out. They're kind of out in the body cavity like this, and then they come down here and connect. So these are on top of and around this whole stomach area, and then they attach here, and what they're doing is bringing in waste. So they would be collecting tiny bits of waste, little molecules. I'm going to make my silk glands yellow. Put that down on my key. You can make them another color. And the best way to find them is kind of look for the openings out here. And there's not this middle one, but there's two little openings that lead into these glands. Take a minute and look carefully. And then once you find them, it's kind of obvious. You go, oh yeah, there they are. And they would lead back into these. Now, these are very much simplified. Silk glands can be very complicated. You can have different kinds of silk glands, and each gland can make different kinds of silk. Some silk is stronger or thinner or stickier or not so sticky. So there's a whole branch of science practically that studies these silk glands. It's amazing. The silk is stronger than steel for its size. So if you had a piece of spider silk from a spider web and you could enlarge it to be the size of a rope, pretty good sized rope, it would be stronger than a steel cable that size. And in fact, they say you could do something like stop a jet airplane from taking off. If you had a piece of spider silk as big as a rope, you could hold a jet airplane. That's pretty amazing. And this little bump here where the silk actually comes out, this little thing is called a spinneret with two N's, S-P-I-N-N-E-R-E-T. So here we have two spinnerets, one here and one there, but I just labeled this one. And then before we leave the abdomen, we're going to do this area and these. And this is the ovary. We can just label this 9. And this little thing down here is number 8. And that is a pouch for storing sperm. So the male spider comes over and basically hands, like with his palps or his arms, hands a little packet of sperm cells which are necessary to join with the egg. You want to make a baby spider, you need some cells from the male. And so he says, here, would you like to have these cells so you can fertilize your eggs? And the female would say, sure, but where do I keep them? I'm not planning on laying eggs until 2 weeks from now, and you're trying to give me this little sperm packet now. Well, hey, she's got a pocket, so she can tuck those little sperm packets right in here into this little pocket, and it just acts like a little pocket, and then they can sit there and she can store it, and then when she gets around to laying eggs, she can combine them with the little sperm cells that are waiting there in the pocket, and then the eggs will turn into baby spiders. So to make this look like eggs, here's a very easy thing to do. Just make lots of little letter C's. You don't have to draw little circles even. Letter C's will be good enough. As long as your C's are all going the same way. And it'll just look like a big lumpy thing full of something round, which are eggs. Like that. And so this would be the place where the eggs come out. Here. Where eggs come out. And then we're going to slide up here, and what haven't we done here? The most exciting part of the spider, the venom gland. And I'm just going to close that off like that. And so this would be the fang. Of course, we only see one here, sliced in half. So the venom is what's used to paralyze or kill the prey, and then the digestive juices here, coming out here, are used to digest it. So we have two different chemicals being pumped into its prey, one to paralyze it and one to digest it. Now there's one last thing we haven't done. The first thing over here on our chart, the muscles. Now it's very unusual to find muscles drawn in on these diagrams. This is usually what you see and that's it. But I want us to put in some muscles. I'm going to use brown. I haven't used any brown yet. So we don't know exactly where they would go. I don't have any diagrams to work from. But let's just put some brown stripes back here. You know there would be lots of muscles going into the legs, obviously, because the legs have to move. But there would be muscles in and around the fang. It has to move. And the palp would have them. There might be some muscles, well, we can't really see under here, but in the back there'd be muscles going to these legs. Don't draw on too many, just real lightly. You don't have to color the whole thing in. There would be muscles around the sucking stomach. Draw some more here on my legs. I know we don't want to cover over this nice nerves that we drew. Careful not to cover them over. And back here we might have some muscles that the abdomen can move. We wouldn't have as many muscles back here. So what needs muscles? The ovary, the lungs, not too much. We might have some very, very small microscopic muscles, like for the squeezing back in here to squeeze out silk. We would have some muscles helping to control the move of the spinner guts around. And of course we'd have muscles around this tube here. We'd have muscles probably going this way and that way. We don't want to create a mess here. Just to suggest it, just so we know they're there. That's a muscular tube. And then if you want to do some more research and add something else, you're welcome to. You can want to add some more hairs. But that's the basics that you need to know.